Hi folks, welcome to The Financial Argument. What spurred the global food crisis, which I often discussed in my videos where I continue to urge you to be prepared, is not just natural disasters. It goes much deeper than that and is as if it's a part of a series of plans designed by someone to control people in a new system of their own design. And so it's not difficult to predict that 2022 will be a year of serious water and food shortages that will cause economic and social disasters on a scale never before seen in human history. But what I'm going to tell you in detail in a moment, based on the latest news about food shortages in this first month of 2022, leads me to believe that the plan for the global food crisis is accelerating. It's coming quicker than we expected. Moreover, the plan is not only a food shortage, it's also a supply shortage. I'm not referring to the supply chain problems we've seen since the health crisis began. This is much greater. I'm not just referring to some foods, toilet paper, microchips, lumber, plastic, and other items with shortages in recent months. I'm talking about basic items we take for granted that we need to go about our day-to-day lives. This will be very difficult for those who are not ready. Some people will never understand what's going on until it's staring them in the face, and by then, there won't be much they can do, if at all. Unfortunately, some of them may even be close friends or family. If you don't wish to follow the same fate, please watch this video until the end. Never forget that food shortages don't always happen for natural reasons, but are sometimes engineered. Some of you may have noticed these engineering experiments may be first implemented in far-off and little-known countries the average Westerner does not see in headlines and may not even be able to locate on a map. These nations are essentially test subjects, and their obscurity is exactly why they choose these populations to keep you in the dark. Increased prices and shortages of energy resources are the most important factors affecting supply chains, which is why they're so connected to the upcoming food crisis. In this context, let's start by taking a brief look at a recent uprising in Central Asia. Are you aware of what's happened in Kazakhstan in recent days as a result of rising food and energy prices? We saw Kazakhs take to the streets in protest, with Russia almost usurping Kazakhstan. If you don't know already, Kazakhstan was occupied by the former Soviet Union and remains in Russia's orbit to this day. I also want to note that Kazakhstan was home to the Soviet Union's Semipalatinsk test site, where they conducted 456 tests in the 40-year period before the site closed in 1991. I won't go into more detail because that would require another video, so I'll stick to the point. The way I see it, Russia will tighten its grip on the natural energy resources and companies in this country, which are already under its monopoly. A logical move on Russia's part in this time of energy shortages and peak prices. What makes Kazakhstan special is that it's one of the world's leading producers of coal, gas, and oil. It's also the world's largest exporter of uranium. It's at the expense of the people on the bottom that those who have access to this wealth of energy are rising. If Russia's coming to their rescue, please think about it. While Russia's price manipulations in the energy sector, which have become more monopolized than ever, will mean more expensive energy for first Europe, then for the United States, it will also be a disaster for U.S. companies investing in Kazakhstan. As Secretary of State Anthony J. Blinken said on the 7th of January, once Russians are in your house, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to leave. This story won't stop in Kazakhstan. You'll soon see the same problems in Turkmenistan, another country in Russia's sphere, which also belonged to the former USSR. The situation there too is complicated. Turkmenistan is the largest electricity and natural gas producer in the region. Most of this energy goes directly to China, and what a coincidence, a number of food regulations were made in Turkmenistan last November. These new regulations were set to become implemented in early 2022, which perfectly lines up with the unrest we're seeing in the region today. According to the new legal regulations, access to state-run stores in the provinces where citizens of Turkmenistan can find food at cheaper prices will be limited. Many stores have already begun rationing food due to inflation and limited supply. People with standing utilities debt and family members of prisoners and Turkmen migrant workers that live and work abroad will lose their access to subsidized food completely. And so, despite the country's abundance of natural resources, millions of poverty-stricken people will continue to be put to the test by a food crisis. We know how the story will play out. Pay attention to coming events in these energy-rich countries located between China and Russia, where the average citizen struggles to get by. In these last days, when retaining access to energy is very vital, notice how Russia and China take measures against the impending global food crisis and promote their own interests, securing their trade routes and borders. You'll see that nothing is a coincidence, and it's happening right before our eyes. Violence due to food shortages does not only occur in far-off countries, the same occurs in Western countries, because the sensation of hunger has no geography. The United Kingdom is seeing the first effects of a food shortage right now. According to the news, they're seeing an increase in street fights and violence. A recent YouGov poll revealed that Britons are ahead of 12 other EU countries when it comes to dealing with food and fuel shortages. Unfortunately, the country next in line after the UK in the poll was the US. The situation in Australia is worsening as well. We have many viewers from Australia, so I encourage them to share their experiences in the comments. It appears there may be shortages of fresh produce available in grocery stores. According to Michael Rogers, CEO of Australian Fresh Produce Alliance, Australians face significant risk of facing these shortages. Of course, this has to do with the health crisis and staffing shortages it caused, which means produce wastes away, rotting on farms with no one to help pick it and transport it. We saw similar dynamics before the 2008 financial crisis as well. Their method is simple: increase commodity prices, damage the supply chain, and make it difficult to access food. The situation results in the masses revolting. We know that what started the Arab Spring was the people who took to the streets as a result of rising food prices. Afterwards, the leaders and demographics of many of these countries were changed, with many countries benefiting from this situation. An environment was created for central banks to print more money. At the moment, the situation is worse. Commodity prices have risen exponentially. And worse, we're seeing even more extreme experiments than before playing out in countries around the world. Here's how an engineered global food crisis works. First of all, contrary to what you might expect, it does not simply appear as empty supermarket shelves. When the prices of goods increase, you'll see the products you want to buy in the supermarkets, but their prices have skyrocketed. Are we currently experiencing this? The Washington Post reported that in December of 2021, we saw prices in November go up at a rate we haven't seen in 40 years, 6.8% higher than the same time frame in 2020. This isn't just affecting certain items like we're seeing at the beginning of the health crisis. The rising prices are hitting everything from eggs to flour to steak. Beef prices increased by about 20% in a year, with meat in general increasing by 16%. So how are prices deliberately increased? Well, let's take a look at how they implemented their plan. Suddenly, a health crisis begins and the entire supply chain and workforce is affected. In the beginning, they told us it'd soon be over, and now the same people are extending the timeline. Next, print excessive amounts of money to speed up inflation, citing the health crisis as an excuse. A couple thousand in stimulus checks doesn't help the average American much in the long run, but it does help accelerate the plan. If you really think about it, their methods are simple and straightforward. Then the second stage of the plan begins. In addition to the increasing prices, the supply chain deteriorates, the workforce decreases, weather negatively affects entire areas, the cost of energy increases, and endemic animal diseases become more widespread. Suddenly, there's a scarcity of products in the markets due to many natural and unnatural reasons. Hunger is a very sensitive issue, and it can turn even the most model citizen into a looter when they see their children staring at them with hungry eyes. Visualize millions of hungry fathers and mothers whose children are hungry. This is how people overwhelmed by famines turn to acts of mass and personal aggression and looting. In some cases, the police force is insufficient, and depending on the situation, they become a part of the unrest because the police are a part of society and their families are affected by it. Let's take Kazakhstan. We know that during the protests in Kazakhstan, many police chose to do nothing. There's no guarantee that a police force will protect you when things get out of hand. Even if they prefer to intervene in the events, they will not be enough in the face of increasing looting and other crimes. So who will save you from the looters who are kicking your door in hopes of finding a few pieces of food? You have to protect yourself and your loved ones. So what preparations are you making for this? The final stage of the plan involves controlling people and enforcing the new order. People who've been through the worst of misery and hunger are more likely to obey and be controlled, and they have nothing else to do but obey the new order. If you ask why they want to implement this plan in the first place, the answer is quite simple. According to estimates, the world population is growing and will reach 10 billion by 2050. This means less resources for the billions of people with diversified needs and shopping habits. Mathematically, that means 10 billion angry and hungry people, minus a few families, to deal with in 2050. In order to prevent this, a system where fewer people live is considered. Those who are naturally and unnaturally weak will be eliminated. Have you ever wondered why the Chinese became accustomed to eating everything that's not on the menu for most of us? The Chinese suffered a great hunger crisis 60 years ago, and suffered greatly. I cannot tell you in detail what they went through, what people ate, and what they traded. Telling you how they ate insects or boiled their leather clothing in water to eat it is barely scratching the surface. If you're curious, you can research it yourself. However, I don't recommend you do if you're easily disturbed. I also want to mention I cannot tell you everything in detail here because most platforms are ready to ban channels like mine, citing the most minor excuse. Aside from my experience on this platform, Vimeo, where I published special videos for my Patreon members last week, terminated my channel. I was uploading a video, and before it finished, I received a message that my account was removed. Fortunately, I found another platform to upload it to and solve the problem. If you want to access these videos or other benefits and be one of the great people you see on your screen who help keep the financial argument alive, visit my Patreon page. I know my videos can be difficult to swallow for many folks, but they deal with the truth, so it's no surprise some of my content is blocked. That's why your support is so important to keep the channel going. Everyone is going through hard times, so if your financial situation is difficult, please support the financial argument with your comments and likes. Let's continue. As you've probably noticed, food and energy prices have skyrocketed to almost all-time highs all over the world and in the US. We know how chaotic the supply chain is right now. Many factors are involved. We're seeing problems in one of the first links of the supply chain, agriculture, then transportation with truck driver shortages, shipping problems, and more. I'll upload a detailed video about the fertilizer prices that massively shot up as a result of companies closing due to increased energy costs and the relationship between fertilizer prices and food prices. There's much for me to discuss, so don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss upcoming videos. Have you ever wondered what China's been up to while all this is going on? First of all, as I told you last year, China continues to stockpile more and more foods than it needs. On top of that, last November, the Chinese government ordered all Chinese to stock up on water and food for the winter. So why did they tell their citizens to focus on this winter months ago? I'll leave the answer to you. We're also seeing increases in animal diseases, which are another factor in worsening food shortages. These can severely impact egg and chicken prices specifically. In other words, what I'm telling you is we will soon experience chicken and egg shortages. In addition to all this, natural disasters just add fuel to the fire. I have a difficult time labeling the tens of thousands of forest fires that broke out at the same time all over the world as coincidental or even natural disasters in the first place. Many of these forests see constant rains and do not experience drought, so it's very difficult for a fire to occur naturally. You may wonder why anyone would ignite forest fires on purpose. The answer is quite simple. Declining forests lead to major climate disruption, which can catastrophically affect agriculture activities. In addition, the prices of products obtained from wood products will increase, such as timber and toilet paper. What a coincidence! We're experiencing incredible shortages and increases in both of these categories, are we not? Excessive rainfall or drought endanger farms more than anyone, and we know that this year the harvest will be very, very bad. On top of that, a solar storm is also expected this year. Solar storms can damage satellites and affect communication. They can even disable electrical grids. As a result of the geomagnetic storm in 1859, telegraph networks were disabled all over Europe and America. That means we won't have electricity. And I guess we'll need candles too. I invite you to again stock up on food and water for the upcoming everything shortage, folks. Do this before it's too late. You can find many videos online that explain how. They may think you're exaggerating, crazy, and believe conspiracy theories. Do it anyway. The system has turned the masses into sleeping sheep who believe that preparation is unnecessary. If they're still with you, please go and ask your grandparents about these preparations. Up until a few generations ago, stocking up on food for a few months was par for the course and deemed a very necessary practice. Anything could happen. Major conflicts, natural events, earthquakes. It doesn't hurt to prepare because even if nothing happens, you're just left with a surplus of food that you and your family can consume. What's the danger in that? It used to be that people who didn't stock up on food and water for the coming months were looked upon as crazy. Today, things have changed so much that people have become addicted to supermarkets and see common sense preparations as something out of the ordinary. What makes these people so brave is their ignorance and their sleepiness. They think they can go to the supermarket at any moment and find what they want. But when they come across empty shelves, it'll be too late. They should know that, like everything else, commodity markets and supply chains can be easily infiltrated, manipulated, and weaponized against a nation. If an enemy has identified a weakness in your supply chain, that makes it all the more easier for them. God bless you all.